3 children were killed inside their own home. Their mother does not dispute that she killed them, but that isn't actually the question at the center of the Lindsay Clancy case. The question is much harder. What was happening inside her mind when she did it? And before we go any further, I also want to explain something. You may start to notice that I'm going to intentionally leave Lindsay's husband out of this discussion. And that's not because he isn't important. It's because the central question this trial is asking isn't about Patrick Clancy. It's about Lindsay Clancy, her mental state, and at the moment that these crimes occurred, there has been a tremendous amount of speculation online about Patrick. But speculation isn't what this video is about. And my goal isn't to assign blame beyond what the evidence is actually being presented in court. It's actually asking the jury to decide. Because before January 24th, 2023, Lindsay Clancy wasn't simply a mother sitting at home showing no signs that something was wrong. She was constantly seeking help. She was seeing mental health professionals, counselors, therapists. She was struggling with severe insomnia, anxiety, depression. And I want to say roughly over a period of 4 months, records have showed multiple of her providers described her 13 different medications. 13 of them. She sought inpatient psychiatric treatment, and she even contacted a suicide hotline. And in the days and the weeks before her children died, her internet history included searches involving hallucinations, suicide, and as well as the medications. 4 days before these children passed away, her internet search can show how do you treat a sociopath. Now, mental health professionals who evaluated Lindsay testified that she did not tell them she wanted to hurt her children. Some, in fact, actually testified that they did not even observe any evidence of psychosis. And that's where this case becomes incredibly complicated. Because on January 24th, Lindsay took one of her children to actually one of these appointments. She even played outside with her kids, and they built a snowman. If I'm not even mistaken, I believe she even sent pictures to a family member or to family itself. So if you are a stranger that's looking in from the outside, you know, that day itself looks ordinary. Then later on in that evening, she asked her husband, Patrick, to leave the house, to go grab her medication at the local pharmacy. She asked him to go to the restaurant to pick up the food. Now, this is where the prosecutors itself say that this was not a random accident. And their argument there now lies that she deliberately created that window of time where she could be alone with the children while Patrick was gone. And during that very short period of time, everything in their entire lives have changed. Their 3 children, Cora, Dawson, and Callan, were strangled. The crazy part is then Lindsay jumped from a second-story window in what the court has described as a suicide attempt, and she has survived. All of her children did not. And now what we have here is 2 completely different interpretations of what happened inside that house, which are what is being presented in court itself. The prosecution itself points towards evidence of planning, Patrick's errands, the timing, the window, the opportunity that she created when her husband left the house. They portray her behavior before the killings and her ability to function throughout that day. The defense points towards something totally opposite. They point towards the severe psychiatric deterioration that her mindset was going through. And this is where I have also seen throughout social media of some people where they start to automatically contribute Patrick into that. And specifically, I'm going to leave him out of this video, and we can make an entirely new one just on that alone. But for now, I just want to focus in on what the jury itself has to actually figure out. Because the defense, they argue that Lindsay was suffering from postpartum psychosis and that she is not criminally responsible for what she did. Her defense has also maintained that Lindsay heard a male voice telling her to kill the children and herself. So prosecutors, obviously, they're going to challenge that account. Because before any of the killings ever happened, clinicians who treated Lindsay testified that she did not report hearing any of those voices or having any kind of thoughts about harming herself or her children. So now the jury itself has to examine something far more complicated than simply just determining who committed the crime. They also have to look at the condition of the person who committed the crime, which would be Lindsay in this case. And this distinction matters far deeper than what a lot of people want to give credit to. Because mental illness and legal insanity are not automatically the same thing. Someone can suffer from serious mental illness and still be legally responsible for their actions. The question becomes what the illness did to the person's ability to understand their perception of reality and their actions at the moment that the crime occurred. And that's why that evidence that appears incredibly important can sometimes point in completely opposite directions. So we're going to take Lindsay's internet searches, for one, where she deliberately searches for psychosis, which could suggest someone recognized that something was happening psychologically wrong with them. And she was desperately trying to understand what was going on. And now the prosecutors can also ask on that aspect if she understood enough to research that. What did she understand about her own mental condition? Then there's the alleged planning. If Lindsay deliberately waited until Patrick to leave, does that demonstrate an understanding of what she was doing? Or can someone experience a level of psychosis and still organize their thoughts and their behaviors while experiencing a profoundly distorted perception of reality? And answering these questions may come with uncomfortable answers. And then there's another layer to this case that exists regardless of how the jury is ultimately going to rule. Lindsay was already a patient inside the healthcare, mental health care system. She wasn't completely disconnected from having any kind of treatment. In fact, she actually completely had multiple clinicians, if I'm not mistaken. And also she received numerous prescription pills. So she sought additional help. She even contacted a suicide hotline. And yet on January 24th, these 3 children still passed away. So this case isn't only forcing a courtroom to examine one mother's mental state. It starts raising a lot more larger questions. What does severe psychiatric deterioration look like? And can someone appear functional while becoming dangerously unwell internally? How effectively can multiple doctors coordinate treatment when numerous medications and providers become involved? Are they even all talking together? And perhaps the hardest question of all is, where does the mental illness end and criminal responsibility truly start to begin? Because there are facts in the case that support these questions raised by the prosecution. There are facts that support these questions raised by the defense as well. And then there are 3 children whose lives cannot become secondary to the debate surrounding their mom. We still have to think of Cora, Dawson, and Callan. Whatever the verdict eventually comes from this courtroom, their names and their lives matter. And as Lindsay's trial starts to continue, the jury isn't just being asked to determine whether something horrific happened. They already know what happened, and everyone agrees that it did. They're being asked to determine something considerably harder on their end. What was happening inside of Lindsay herself in her mind when this did happen. And what does that mean under the law itself? And maybe this is why the case has become so difficult for people to talk about. Obviously, there are a lot of speculations online and some things that seem incredibly like a gray area and sketchy and fishy, and this is why Patrick now is being brought into it, even though the law itself has already ruled him out as a suspect. Because understanding someone's mental state itself, like Lindsay's mental state, it does not automatically require us to excuse their actions. Acknowledging what they did also does not automatically tell us what is happening inside them internally. Sometimes both of these questions have to exist and be answered at the same exact time. Specifically in this case, 12 jurors are going to have to answer them. And that right there is the toughest job that anyone can have.